Do you want to do marriage your way, or do you want to do marriage God's way? I'm reading in Mark chapter 10 in my one-year Bible reading plan, where the Pharisees are trying to trap Jesus along issues of marriage, and they ask the question, should a man be allowed to divorce his wife? Jesus says, well, what does Moses in the law say? By which they respond, he permits it. But Jesus corrects them. He says, no, Moses only gave this to you as a concession to your hard hearts. In other words, divorce was never part of God's plan for marriage, but most people treat divorce like a first option rather than a last resort. And this is not to say that the Bible doesn't talk about grounds for divorce. It talks about in Matthew chapter 5, in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, the different biblical grounds for divorce. But specifically, the Bible talks more about reconciliation versus divorce, but most people want to jump to divorce rather than reconciling. But see, Jesus doesn't just talk about the issues about the ending of marriage, but Jesus also confronts issues about pre-marriage. And as a pastor who has done premarital counseling, I've officiated many weddings, there's a huge issue in today's society, and Jesus wants to talk about this. He says, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife. And I've seen a lot of people who have boyfriends and girlfriends, but they treat that relationship like a marriage, even though it's not. There's people who are cohabitating. There are people who are having sex outside of marriage. And see, God isn't trying to be a fun sucker, but God is trying to set up the grounds for healthy marriage, the grounds for the best path to success. And I do believe most people have good intentions and good hearts, and maybe there's just a lack of understanding of what is the right way to go about holy matrimony. And I just want to ask people this question, because people come to pastors or they get really offended because a pastor or a church won't officiate their wedding because maybe they're living together, or maybe they're living in sin, and they get offended. But you're asking the church to do something that they go against what they believe, or you're asking a pastor to officiate a wedding that really goes against their biblical standards for marriage. And it's not even their standards, right? It's standards in the Word of God. And so my main question is this, is if you're preparing for marriage, or maybe you're living with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, I want to challenge you. Do you want your marriage to honor God? And what is the purpose of your marriage? Ask that question of yourself. Do you want your marriage to honor God, or is it more about you?